He isn't able to make it, so I get to do a self-introduction. And if you weren't here a couple weeks ago for the presentation I gave, my name's Peggy Currid. I'm the editor here at ICT. I've been working here since April, and my primary responsibility is to edit and review and process and do everything I can to all the research reports that we publish. One of the things I've done here also is work with IDOT-BMPR to revise some of these guidelines and procedures we use for the whole report editing, reviewing, and publishing process. So that's kind of what I'm going to focus on today. A few other little things that are important, things you might need to know, things that have changed or things that have not changed but a lot of people don't know about. So that's where we're going to go with this. First of all, almost every document I'm going to be showing you is available on the ICT website under ICT Forms and Guidelines. And if you scroll down to the bottom here, that's where most of these documents are going to be found that I'll be referring to. Okay, so let's look at the most important thing is the new review process. We've changed the way, the order of how things happen. So I'm going to show you that. This is also in our guidelines online. So now I realize that we may have to, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm not going to read these word for word, so that's not the point here. I'm just going to give you an overview. You can read these online. Okay, so what we've done is introduce a different step. We now have the preliminary edit phase, and that's where the PI sends the complete report in Word format to me, rather than to the TRP chair, which had always been the first step in the past. And there are formatting guidelines that I'll explain to you that need to be followed. Reports not in that format will be returned for reformatting and resubmission. Okay, but assuming everybody does that correctly, then what happens is I'm going to perform a comprehensive technical edit, and then I'm going to send that back to you, well, the PI, as it says, after I edit it. Then the PI will review the edits, address all the questions, accept, reject, everything like that, the normal Word review process, and pass it on to the TRP chair. Then the TRP will do their normal review and probably pass it back to the PI just to straighten out whatever last-minute concerns they have. Then it finally comes back to me for a final edit where I do another read-through, make sure everything looks good, and republish it. One of the important new documents, processes we're going to have here is when you're in the final edit phase, that's when everything, the TRP's seen it, everything looks great. You need to send it back to me. We now have something called the Review Approval Sign-Off Sheet, which is available in Word and PDF on our website. I'll show you those in a moment. The benefit of doing this new procedure is the grammar and just some of the overall readability issues will be dealt with before they go to the TRP, which will allow the TRP to concentrate on the content, not the grammatical errors. It helps them read it a lot more quickly, so it's really a benefit to them, and it should speed the process along considerably. So we hope. Okay, so the new form I referred to, the TRP approval form, this is also available on our website. Zoom in a little bit. Hang on. You don't need to read this word for word. This, again, it just sort of summarizes the various phases. The bottom half is what we're all going to be concerned about. The PI will complete the first part, project title, project number, name of all the principal investigators. If there was any equipment that was purchased and used, they would fill out this shaded box in the middle. And then this document gets forwarded by the PI to the TRP chair, who signs off. And then we know everybody's seen it, everybody's happy with it, and we can officially publish it. This document's available in a Word or a PDF form fillable thing that's easy to email back and forth. Okay, another thing that often is overlooked in submitting reports is called the technical documentation page. And that's available for download. I don't know what, hang on, I'm having trouble with my bar there. All right. Most of the stuff I'm happy to fill out for you, like the report numbers and the numbers we assign to them. But the things I've highlighted in yellow, which I realize this is blurry, but title and subtitle of the report, author names, an abstract, that should be completed, and then the keywords. I'll take care of everything else. But this should be submitted with your report when it comes to me for editing. Okay, what else do we have? Okay, back to some guidelines. In our guidelines, there's a page called Manuscript Specifications. This sort of gives you an overview of the format we like, you know, how you should organize your report. I think everybody probably knows that. I've highlighted this in yellow because it's important, and this has been something that's been overlooked, is the maximum length of the report is 75 single-spaced pages. Okay. The good news is we don't count your appendixes in that. So if you have a lot of extra material you can put back in the appendix, that's a great idea. However, the thing to remember is if you are going to need to go over that 75-page limit, you have to get approval from of IDOT and ICT before you submit it. You just can't submit it and then hopefully that we say it's okay. Let's see. The rest of the stuff down here are just specifications about how your page layout is. I'm not going to cover these because you can read them yourself, and I've also got a template that I've now created that you can use that will handle all this for you, so that should make it a little bit easier. I think that's all there is there. Okay, here is the template. This is also downloadable. It's a new document we've put up on our website. Scroll through here. First of all, if you're not familiar with using Word style templates, here's a brief little overview of how you can load one into your Word document. This is available online. It'll just walk you through the steps. I'm going to do a live demo for you in a moment here. Just for your information, here are what the chapter titles look like, heading level 1, 2, 3, body type, all that stuff. Again, these are all in the template, so you don't have to worry about thinking, is that 11-point Arial, font, bold, whatever, because the template will cover all that. This document also includes a sort of a shell of a cover page. You can download this and use it. It includes all the information that needs to be there, so you don't have to recreate anything from scratch. Some of these things, the numbers, ICT, I'll fill those in. We have a numbering system. But everything else you can just put in your title and your research. I'll do the report number, author names, project name, project number, all that stuff. I recommend you just copy and paste this and just use it. Okay, so let's see, the template. This is the fun part. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to clear everything out of here. Hold on. Get it all where there's no formatting at all. Okay, so once you upload the template into your Word document, and if you show your style bar, you're going to see there's, I'm not sure how blurry that is or how well you can see it. But over here, you'll see things like ICT, body text, ICT, bullet list, ICT, figure caption. These are all the elements that are going to be in your report, or at least 99% of them. And you can use these then to apply the correct style as you work. Or if you've not used it and you've just written everything out, you can import the template and then go through and apply everything. And does anybody not know how Word templates work? Style sheets? Well, that's good. Everybody knows how to use it then, so this will be real quick. So here's your chapter title. I go and I click on that, and then I click on chapter title. Here's your heading 1. Yay. Here's heading 2. Here's your body text. Here's another body text. Here's a table caption. Here's some more body text. Let's say we don't want to indent that paragraph. So there's a body text, no indent. That's nice. We go back to body text. Here's a heading 2. Body text. Heading 2. And here's a heading 3. We do go down to, I think, heading level 4, but I don't have any of those in this document. It's the same thing with bullet lists. I didn't put any bullet lists in, but let's pretend these are going to be bullet lists. You can just select your text and make it into bullet lists. One thing I want to explain about the heading levels is this confuses some people is when I say a heading level 1, I'm talking about this one right here, 3.1. By 1, I mean there's one number past the dot. That's how the leveling system works, the hierarchy. So that's, even though there's 2 digits in there, that's a heading level 1. If it's 3.1.1, there are 2 dots past the chapter, 2 numerals past the chapter number, so that's a heading level 2. So you wouldn't want to style that as a heading level 3. That's actually a 2. Most of the table formatting I don't see a problem with. Most people just use the automatic table numbering, and as long as you can use the standard font and everything fits and looks nice, we don't have any issue with that. I think that's it. So you can go through an entire document like that pretty quickly if you have the template set up. Let's see. Okay, the next one is something that we were requested to implement with, IDOT requested that we do this and start enforcing it either at the editing stage, which I'm happy to do, but it takes a long time, or at the writing stage. So I'm asking you when verb tenses. Whenever you submit a report as you're writing it, you should be thinking in terms of what verb tenses am I going to use, because every group, journals, everybody has their own set of standards and rules on this, so there's no one way to do it. But we do want to be uniform and consistent, so this is what, working with IDOT, my colleagues there, this is what we've come up with. I'm not going to read these for you word by word because they're online. But the point being, you should try to make an effort to conform to these as much as you can when you're writing. Like when you use past tense in the executive summary, the introduction sometimes uses a combination. You can read these examples. Literature reviews often used in past tense. Obviously your results are because you're discussing things that have happened in the past. And your discussion and conclusion, it depends on what you're talking about, but I've provided some examples. The reason we do this is one of the chief complaints we get is people are just picking whatever random verb tense that crosses their mind, and even in the same paragraph you see 2 or 3 different tenses. And that's one of those attention to detail things that suggests that if you're not paying attention to that level of detail, people almost think, well, how, have they paid attention to the detail of their study? It just shows that you're not really conforming to standard scientific publication rules. So we will do that. The reports I've already got in my desk to edit, I'll be taking care of these as I edit them, but it sure would be a great time saver if I didn't have to do that in future reports. Okay. Now we're going to get down to some really overwhelming things. I've been asked to do what's called a medium level edit whenever a report comes to me. And there's 3 levels of editing. There's really light, there's medium, and there's really heavy. So we're doing sort of a medium. And I don't have this online, but if anybody, I ought to put it online. I think I'm thinking about it. But if you want it, email me, contact me, and I'll send it to you. These are the things that I do when I'm doing a medium edit. An X means that I fix it if I see the problem, and a Q means that I call it to query. I call it to the attention of the author and ask him or her to fix it. And this is organized into the structure and format of your report. Things like, are your headings in the right order? Are they in logical order? Are they formatted correctly? If you're mentioning tables, or if you're talking about some tabular data, you're describing it in your text, but it doesn't adhere to what's in the table, like you have a typo in the numbers and they don't match up, and then something just doesn't add up. Formatting issues. I do cross-check in the reference list. If you cite a source in your paper, I go immediately to look at the reference list to see if it's there, and vice versa. Everything in the reference list, I make sure it's been cited in the paper. I also check that your formatting is okay, and that, whether you're using Chicago Manual or a scientific style, I'd like to see consistency in how your citations are used and the references are styled. Graphics aren't usually too much of a problem. Orientation, it's rare that I see someone put one upside down, but it happens. The visual quality, if I think that they're going to be blurry or something, or not reproduce well, I'll call that to the author's attention. Oh, I overlooked something here. Up here where I've got that yellow highlight, when I say I'm cross-checking your in-text citations against the reference list, I'll check it, but if there's a discrepancy, I will call it to your attention and ask you to resolve it. Like I'll say, you cited this in your paper, but it's not in your reference list, please add it. That's what I mean by the X and the Q. Okay, now to the text. This is where we get down into a lot of the grammar stuff that I just check as I'm reading through. Obviously misspellings, subject-verb disagreements, embarrassing dangling participles. I think I spoke of those in my scientific writing seminar a couple weeks ago. Got some good examples if you want to see those. Correct word choice, punctuation, just the whole 9 yards. Everything that your English teacher or your writing teacher harangued you about in high school, well, that's what I'm checking for. And I'm happy to make this list available because it's a good thing sometimes after you've written your report to kind of read through it separately and double check to make sure that you've paid attention to these. I don't expect perfection. I just, if you've shown that you've tried to pay some attention to it and attempted to follow this, that'll speed things along too. Okay. Oh, and now I want to show a typical paper that I've edited for an IDOT report. This is what the PI will get back after I've spent some quality time with it. This is about an average amount of editing. Again, it's indicative of a medium level edit. So the changes in a medium level edit don't necessarily, it doesn't refer to the number of changes, it refers to the nature of the changes, the type of changes I'm making. But I didn't insert any comments, but lots of times I'll insert a comment to the author to check something. So you're going to see something like, along these lines, all the red and the blue. Not terribly difficult to read through and to correct, accepting or rejecting. I'm going to save that. Okay, does anyone know how long it takes to edit a paper? There's actually a formula for figuring this out. I like to share it with people because if they can apply this formula to their document, it'll give them a rough idea of the amount of editorial intervention that's going to be needed. I don't believe I have this online either, but this is something I'm happy to share with anybody who wants it. Okay, first thing you do is there's something that's called an editable page, which is about 250 words. So if your document has 30,000 words, I divide it by 250 to get a rough page count. So with that page count, I then use this equation right here, and that helps me calculate my hours. 10 equals about the average number of pages I can edit in an hour. 1.5 represents, well, I do 2 complete read-throughs. The first one takes longer than the second one, so rather than having a multiplier of 2, I just do 1.5 because my second read through will be a little bit quicker. And then I add 10%. That's my contingency factor for things that I have to do, like conducting minor research to clarify statements, or if it looks like I can quickly find a reference that you'd omitted, I might do that. Sometimes there's emails back and forth. There's cross-checking things I've got to do, and handling all the unforeseen that happens regardless of how careful you are. So if you take a report with 31,500 words, which seems to be about average, that turns into 126 pages of editing. And then I apply that formula, and I end up with 20.79. So I'm going to estimate about 21 hours of hands-on time of editing the report. Okay, some common problems. I promised I would, I think in my introduction to this description of this seminar, I was going to give you some of my common problems, as I call them, my common complaints. I'll be a little bit less tactful. The page count. Again, I've mentioned this before. I'm going to mention it again because the IDOT really wants us to adhere to that, and ICT wants us to adhere to that too, so we got to do that. So here's some information. If you're single spacing a page and you're using like your standard Arial 11 point font, you're going to get about 600 words per page. So if you turn in a report that has 600 words per page and you haven't had a single figure or a single table, that's going to be 75 pages, will equal about 45,000 words in 75 pages. But nobody ever just uses plain text. They always add figures and tables, which is always necessary. So then you can attribute about 250 words for every figure and every table. So this will help you sort of figure out where your page count's going to be. And if you're, so if you're over 45,000 words, that's going to be more than that's 75 pages. But then if you start adding figures and tables, you're going to be way over 75 pages. So again, as I'd mentioned, the good news is the appendixes don't count in the page limit. So if you have a report that's maybe 100 pages long and you're thinking, well, how do I get this down to 75 pages without cutting a lot of text? Because obviously it's important or you wouldn't put it in there. Some of your figures and tables can often, good idea to move them to an appendix. And I've always noticed that, especially if they're things like regression tables or hourly measurement charts, just sort of things like that, it's much easier just to say, see all these in reference B or whatever. That can sometimes save you, well, depending on how many you have, it could save you 10 pages, 20 pages. And depending on the nature of a report, there also might be other sections or things you can put in an appendix. One time, I don't like to do it a lot, but sometimes we've suggested the author put the literature review in the appendix because they really needed to make some major cuts, and we didn't want to give up the information, so we just moved it to the back. Some other common problems is the formatting. I think this problem is going to go away as people become more and more aware of the template and how to use it. But if they're not formatted, we'll return them because we don't really have anybody to format them besides me, and I've got all this editing to do. Again, so if you use our template, or you can set up your own template that just matches our specs, that were in the guidelines, you're fine. I'll look at it, and if it looks reasonably like it's supposed to look, I'm going to be happy with that. Another problem I see often is the references. I pulled this more than 90% just out of the air, but I think it's pretty close. 90% of the reports and papers I have edited have errors in the references. That's always a common place for people to drop the ball. The common problems are, and if you can check these yourself, it'll save a lot of time, because references are the most time-consuming, annoying, peevesome thing I ever have to deal with. Number one is you have cited a source in the paper, but it's not in your reference list. And the opposite is you have a source in your reference list that's not cited in the paper. Lots of times if you use Word's automatic table of authorities, I think they call it. I don't use that feature since I don't write papers, but that usually keeps you in line and keeps everything matching up. That way you don't have to remember to add them manually because you can automatically do it. Another common one is you'll mention a publication date in your paper, like Jones 2003, and when I go back to the reference list to check it, it says Jones 2004 for that publication, so I don't know which is right or wrong. So you can double check those, which is usually pretty easy to do. And the same thing with author names. I see a lot of instances where an author's, a source author name will be spelled one way in the paper and a different way in the reference list. I can usually look those up pretty quickly with the Google search to get the correct spelling. But if you could do that, that'd save me the trouble. Another thing, this is sort of based on my presentation from earlier in November on tips for scientific writing. So grammar and punctuation is a huge issue in terms of time. And without putting too fine a point on it, please don't submit your first draft to me. It will take me twice as long to edit it. When my high school students tried that with me, they usually got themselves knocked down a grade or two. I can't do that to you, so instead I just prevail upon your kindness and ask you to please go through and read it at least a couple more times, which is standard for writing a paper. Most of the time, you do a complete read-through and you try to eliminate common grammatical errors. You notice some typos that might have gotten through the spell checker. Maybe if you look at that editing checklist, it'll kind of give you a sort of a direction and maybe some things you should be checking for. If you can eliminate a lot of those basic errors that just get by everybody. I mean, everybody's first draft is just going to be riddled with errors. Mine are too, even though supposedly I know grammar. Because I'm writing, I'm not thinking about grammar. So please do that. And if you are lucky enough to have a colleague who seems to have a good command of grammar, and maybe if you're an English major or something, and if they have the time and the interest, maybe they could look through it for you and just sort of point out some overall concerns that you might be able to address. Another thing, and this is also listed in our guidelines for acronyms, they're used fairly inconsistently. I think there's two ways you can handle acronyms that are completely acceptable to me and to most editors and to most publications. Normally, the first time you use an acronym, you spell out the entire name of whatever document, whatever like organization or test or whatever you're acronymizing, and then you put the acronym in parentheses afterwards. Then after that, you just use the acronym. You don't go back and start using the full name again. And that's usually a pretty standard way, but here's an option. Especially, you can do it chapter by chapter. So the first time in chapter 1 a particular acronym's used, you spell it out, put it in parentheses, use acronyms throughout the rest of the chapter. Then you get to chapter 2, you might want to start again. The first time you use the acronym, spell it out, okay, and use acronyms the rest of the time. Then you get to chapter 3 and so forth. This is actually recommended if you've got a really, really long chapter or report where the person who's reading it might not remember that 20 pages before that you mentioned what the acronym was. So it kind of helps them to see it again. It's also good in reports which you think the readers are likely just to maybe read 1 or 2 chapters. So if they dive right into the middle and they're in chapter 3 and you've using all these acronyms they haven't seen before, they don't really want to have to go back to chapter 1 and figure out what it means. Or you can put an acronym list in. A lot of authors do that, just list of common acronyms. But those are very mechanical and easy things to fix. But they're commonly misused. Okay, but wait, there's more. Oops, look, I typed that so quickly and I made a typo. There's more. All right. So whenever these things come across my desk, these problems, and I start dealing with them, and I look at them after I stop crying, this is what I do. It's my ugly, grumpy cat face. So please try to help me not make that face when I read your report. So, Finally, number 10. Say that one. Last thing I want to mention that's important. Our new review process, that's the one where I mentioned first, and I'm just putting it up here again just to emphasize that this is the most important thing you should take away from what I've told you today. Please understand the way it works. Send the report to me first, then look at my edits, process them, send it on to your TRP chair or whoever, the person who has ultimate say-so over your report. And then just follow the steps. It'll make things easier, and IDOT really does enforce that too. And if it's not happening, then we'll have to try to address with it. And sometimes that means you have to go back to stage 1. So I would really rather just have to do this once, as I'm sure you would much rather have to do it just once. So I should have asked along the way that if anybody had any questions, they could have stopped, but I sort of got talking and forgot. But if anybody does have any questions, or if anybody's on the webinar that does, I think, Annie, would you let me know? So, anything in particular you're wondering about? Yes?
Is there any the citation style that we should stick to use for IDOT reports or ISO?
Oh, a particular style? There has never been one as far as I've noticed, and I think at some point I might try to talk to IDOT to see if they want to standardize on one. And I've seen a lot of them. At this point, the answer is no, but if you pick one and you're consistent, that's fine. So if you choose some of the TRB referencing styles, that's great. If you prefer just to use standard Chicago manual style, that's fine too. It's just I get a list of references, and sometimes the title of a book is in italics, and sometimes it's not, and sometimes they use all capital letters, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they're in quotation marks. That's when I see the inconsistency, and that really needs to be cleaned up. So that would be something I'd ask the author to go back and be consistent about. Yeah?
There is a free software on web store named RefWorks.
Yes, yeah.
People can use that. That will help us to be consistent with the referencing style.
Yes, I've never tried that, although I've downloaded it. But again, I don't write papers, so I really haven't had a chance to put it through its paces. But I have seen papers that use it, and I love that when it happens. Because again, you're going to eliminate a lot of the basic mechanical errors that pop up in reference styling. It's a great idea. I'm glad you mentioned it because I should have. Thank you for catching that. That's at WebStore, right?
Yes.
WebStore, okay. So if you're not using that, you might give it a try. Yes?
Yeah. Also, there is a website, SitePass, that uses APA style.
Mm-hmm.
And it just provides you this.
SitePass, is that C-I-T-E?
Yeah, CITpass.com.
And it uses
enter your paper name or authors, and it just
Yes.
prepares it.
You know, you're right, and there's another one I know of, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's really nice because you just put all, everything in there, and it formats it for you automatically, and you can copy and paste it. And that's APA style only? That's unusual for most scientific writers don't use APA style.
Some journals use APA.
Some journals do, okay. That's, if you don't know, that's American Psychological Association. I see that more in the social sciences, obviously. There's also MLA style, Modern Language Association. And you'll see that a lot in like literature, English, things like that, history.
With RefWorks, you can mention any style.
Exactly, that's, yeah.
I think around 20 to 25
Oh.
reference styles.
Wow,
You can pick any one of them
Uh-huh.
and be consistent with that.
that is wonderful. So, and you've
And
used it?
also, if you are changing your
Mhm.
paragraph, you're mentioning reference twice or thrice, that also takes care of that thing.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. These are when those have to be manually checked. That's what takes time because it's easy for the writer to overlook those. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. I want to download that and start using it again just to become familiar with it. I think it'll help me in my editing if I know how the tool's used. So thank you again for recommending that. Any other questions or concerns? Were most of you here I think it was November 8th for the scientific writing, like some tips on improving general writing? because that is now available online on the website. You can watch a video with the PowerPoint in case you didn't see that. And I think I still have the PowerPoint. If you'd just rather look at that, you could let me know and I could send that to you. So anything else? It sounds like citations and references are a big problem, and I'm glad you recognize that because it's one of the biggest problems in editing too, is getting all those straightened out. So, any other questions, comments? Yes?
I don't know if it was discussed at the last one, but with figures, graphs in particular,
Uh-huh.
I think we have a tendency to forget that even though we're working on a color screen, most of our publications are in black and white, so we need to make sure that we're concentrating on symbols rather than colors.
Yes, I've seen that a few times. I wouldn't, I would know that it's a common problem, but it happens often enough that maybe I should have mentioned that. Whenever we make a PDF to put online, of course, that's going to be in color, so that's perfect. But we also do a substantial amount of printing hard copies, and those are in black and white. So if you've got a chart that's in different colors, it's just going to be all blurry gray. So it might be better if you use, like, if you're having like a pie chart or something, use the different little slash marks and check marks and dots and things like that. I wouldn't have any objection to an author giving me two versions of their figures, and I could use the black and white version for the prints and then switch out and use the nice color ones for the electronic version that we post as a PDF. That's not particularly time consuming, and I wouldn't mind doing that. I think color's great. It looks much better, but if you're still printing it in black and white, you're back to the same old problems. So until we can afford color printing all the time. So also another thing I've sometimes noticed with figures is they're not in an editable format because you place them as a graphic. So if there's a typo in the text, I can't fix that, but I usually will just put a note in there, like as a comment saying, to fix that. One thing I do like, though, is tables. Most of the time, those are given to me as text, like as a word table. So if I want to change something or use bold for the headings or something, easy enough to do. But occasionally, the tables are very complicated, and the author just converts them to a graphic, like a PDF, and then drops them in. That's not editable text. As much as possible, it would be great if I could have those in your original text format, so that if I need to do any reformatting or correcting of any typos or something that's inconsistent I want to adjust, I would prefer to have that. Otherwise, I will just write a note and just say your table has a few things I'd like to have changed, in which case you could do it yourself. But oftentimes, it's just easy for me to do it. If I have the text in front of me, I'll do it. I won't bother you about it. So if you can give it to me as text, that's also great. Anything else today? That's good. Well, thank you for your time. And don't forget, I'm here as a resource, not just somebody to criticize your writing, which I don't really do. But if you have a problem or you're thinking of writing a report and you have a concern, you're not sure how the best way to do something is, you just email me or call me or stop by if you're in the building. I can always help you ahead of time. So, thanks.